Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to create professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today I want to talk to you about the 7 stages of volume in GarageBand. That's right, 7 stages of volume in GarageBand. If you've been using GarageBand for a while, you might have realized that it's not just as simple as the individual track volume levels to get everything to sound like it's the right volume to you. This is really important, and there's actually a lot going on behind the scenes and throughout all of GarageBand that are impacting the volumes that we're hearing. So today I want to simplify this for you because it's kind of confusing, but I want to make it as simple as I possibly can, take out any questions that you might have so you understand exactly what the 7 stages of volume are so that you can use them to start making professional sounding music. You can control them, you know exactly what's going on. And it's important we understand these volumes because if we don't understand how they interact when we're recording or mixing, we could end up with levels that are way too loud or way too quiet. So let's do a brief overview of exactly what the 7 stages are, starting kind of from the top down. So this is from the most impactful, the volume that determines how loud everything sounds, down to your individual recorded volume. So the first stage is your interface output volume. This could be your headphone or speaker volume. If you don't use an interface, this could just be the volume output on your computer. Then we have what I like to call the top corner volume or the master volume. Then your master track volume fader, then your master track processing, so any plugins you have on your master track, then your individual track volume, your processing volume or plugin volume on that individual track, and then the actual recorded volume. So let's jump in and start going through these a little bit more specifically, starting with your interface volume. So your interface volume would be the volume knob on your face that controls the volume of your speakers, or if you use headphones, the headphone volume knob, headphone output, or if you don't use an interface, it would just be the volume of your actual computer, right? So what's ever controlling the volume of what you're listening on, that's going to be the most impactful. That's going to completely affect how loud you're hearing what's coming out of GarageBand, right? Then the next stage, one stage down, the second stage, is your top corner volume or your master volume. So that's this volume up here. And this volume is set at 0 inherently, which means it's not adding or taking away volume. But if we listen to this whole mix, as I bring this fader down, it turns the volume down. As I bring it up, it turns the volume up. So this is controlling how loud everything going on in GarageBand sounds. Then we have our master track volume. So your master track is down here. If you're not seeing it, you can go up to track and select show master track. Mine says hide because I'm already showing it. And that will show your master track. And you have a volume fader here as well. Now again, this is going to default to 0, meaning it's not adding or taking away volume. And the difference with this volume is that you can automate it. So if you want to come up or down just a little bit at different moments in the song, you can do that on this master track. But I will caution you, don't do that till the very, very end of your mix, and you very likely don't need to. This is something I only occasionally do for some production shifts throughout the song, but generally speaking, little to no automation on your master track. And then before the master track volume fader, the master track's processing impacts the actual volume of the master track. So if you hit B to bring up your smart control window, if you have the master track selected and you select output, then you'll see the processing, the plugins that are on your master track. You can also get to this from any individual track. So if I have an individual track selected and I just click on master, that's going to show me the plugins on the master track. Now these plugins can add volume, right? So if you have an EQ on your master track and you're doing a huge boost here, so as we listen to it, listen to how the volume kind of goes up as I do a big boost. Sounds louder, right? Sounds louder. Sounds louder. And you could use the volume output here to balance that back out so that it's the same with and without EQ. Or if you're not paying attention, if we set these back to 0, if you're not paying attention and you accidentally have this adding volume or taking away volume, you could just be adding or taking away volume just with the output volume on your plugin. So most plugins have some form of an output volume. Compression is the same. So if you have your compressor, your output gain here is the volume leaving this compressor. So pay attention to that. The processing volume can be impacting your volume. And then before the master track processing, we have your individual track volume, right? So if we go to a vocal here, this is the volume fader on your vocal. That volume is going to be going into your master track processing, into your master track fader, into your top right corner volume or master volume, into your interface volume, right? And before the volume fader here, so if we're listening in solo here, we have our volume fader that can turn it up or down. Before that, we can also be impacted by the processing on our individual track, right? So our compressor here is turning down the volume on this vocal just a little bit. So I use this gain here to balance that back out, but if I set this, I could accidentally turn it way too high or turn it way too low. And so those are also impacting the volume on your individual track. And that's before the volume fader here, right? And then before any of this is our recorded volume level. So how loud do we actually record it? So if you're using an interface, this would be your input knob. That's how you determine how loud you're actually recording it. And we talked in last week's video, so I'm not going to cover it in depth, but you want to be recording around negative 18 dBFS. So if you haven't seen last week's video, I'll link to it above. This video, we talk about your safe recording level, and that's negative 18 dBFS. That's monitoring on VU meter. This is a free plugin, and you can see here, this vocal's going a little bit past, but this is calibrated to negative 18, so 3 past is still negative 15. So we're still at a safe level here. And that's going to be your safe recording level. But depending on how your other volume stages are set up, it might seem too loud or too quiet. Let's look at an example of that. So we have our top right corner volume here. Let's say you turn this down for some reason. Then all of a sudden, your vocal seems very quiet, even though you know you've recorded it at a safe level. Even if we turn this back up to 0, where a volume fader isn't adding or taking away any volume, it still seems too quiet. Or if this is turned way loud, it could seem too loud. Or if your volume fader here is turned too loud. But your recorded volume is before any of this. This is the volume just coming into this track. So you need to set your recording volume at a safe level just based on the recording volume level, right? So monitoring that through an MV Meter 2 plugin is going to kind of be your best way to see exactly how loud it actually is, not how loud we're hearing it based on these other stages, right? This is where it can get really confusing. So how can we simplify this? How can we make this a little bit easier? Because 7 stages is too many. It's just too many stages. Well, first, your main output, your master volume here, your top right corner volume should be set at 0 always. Never mess with that. Just leave that at 0. If you want it to be louder or quieter in general, turn that up on your interface. So your interface becomes the only place that you're turning up your total mix, right? Always keep this at 0. Now, your master track down here, always keep this at 0. As I mentioned, you could do small automations, right? Like we're doing a 1 decibel cut here in this verse to make it a little bit smaller before it goes back into the next chorus. That's fine at the very, very, very end of your mixing process. But otherwise, keep this at 0 always, right? So just set it at 0, set it and forget it. Don't worry about it. Then you know that those two things are not impacting your volume level. Start with your recording volume. When you're working on recording, start with it. Set it 0 and see if that works. And if it's too loud or too quiet, then turn it down or turn it up here, as long as you know you're at a safe level in terms of recording. So that's how I would simplify that. And that goes for mixing as well. So if we're talking about the mixing stage, let's say you're following my 6-step mixing process. So you're aiming for that -6 peak in the loudest section of the song while you're mixing, but it's seeming too quiet to you. Well, you might be inclined to turn up your individual track volume, keep pushing those up higher and higher to get it louder so it seems louder, because no one likes a quiet mix. But you could definitely start to mix way too loud, and then your mix starts to fall apart because you're mixing too loud and it can't stay balanced. You're not leaving any headroom at the top of your mix. So you're throwing yourself completely off when all you really needed to do to hear your mix louder was turn up your interface. Right? So over time, start to develop a mixing level on your interface, a volume where you always set your volume on your interface, whatever that be, whether it's your computer volume or your actual interface, to always be consistent so that you're always mixing at roughly the same level. You'll figure that out over time, what's a comfortable mixing volume for you, but your mix shouldn't sound too quiet or too loud when you're mixing to -6 at the peak. So you want to make sure that that last stage of volume is set at a level that is comfortable for you to mix in. That way you're not throwing off your mix at these other lower stages, as in your individual fader volumes, or you're recording too loud because it seems too quiet as you're recording it. You don't want to throw those off because your interface was just too low. So simplify this by keeping your top right corner, your quote master volume, at 0. Just set that to 0, option click on it, sets it to 0. And keeping your master track at 0. If you set those two at 0 and then you determine the best volume on your interface, it's going to simplify it so much. Okay, so several times in this video, I've mentioned my 6-step mixing process. This is a process I've developed that just walks through the 6 stages that all professional mixes have and how you can do them inside GarageBand completely free. There's a link in the description below where you can grab this checklist. It just walks through the stages really simply and explains everything you need to know to start creating professional sounding music in GarageBand. So be sure to grab that from the link in the description below. Before we go, I want to hear from you. Did you know about these 7 stages of volume in GarageBand? If not, was this helpful? Did this make sense? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you have any questions as well. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.
One thing at a time, I can